Friends and family, people of the community, welcome to Metamorphosis.
Thank you.
An evening of stories and films. I think it's only appropriate to start this evening with acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Aurora people of the Gadigal Nation, their elders past and present, and acknowledge that it always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I think most pertinently it's important to recognise this evening because we're talking about stories. And at its heart, stories are what build humanity. And we stand on the land of a great oral storytelling culture. This evening, I think you're in for a treat. Sit back, enjoy with your wine, and see what's come over a period of a 9-week course. This was a course that was run just around the corner, and at its heart is set in Woolloomooloo. Though the individuals that are going to be sharing stories this evening may not be from the area, it is the place where we met every day, every week, and similarly the place that sort of houses our stories. Phones, got a little indication, good reminder. If you can, try and turn your phones off or on silent now. That would be greatly appreciated. I think it's just a little essay about stories. I think it's important to remember that as humans, stories are the foundation of humanity. They are the reason for being, they are the reason for creating meaning. And in an age that is overwhelmingly filled with information, the internet age as we are coined, it's important to suddenly go back to what a story means and remember the emotional value of communication. At its heart, that's what this evening's about. It's about a group of storytellers sharing some of them they're personal, some of them made up, but sharing a series of stories. And we have it as a celebration of both the oral storytelling from the written word, as well as film. We are all storytellers, but in saying that, please show respect and acknowledge that for some people this is their first time getting up to share. It's also important to acknowledge at this point David and Julie, who run the Sydney Independent Theatre Company, who have made this evening possible. So a big thank you to them. They've donated this space. Excuse me. And so this evening, if any donations that you give go straight to the performers as divided up by the end of the night. So at intermission, you're welcome to give more. But by all means, I'll hand us over now to our MC for this evening. Please enjoy the show. Please hold stories close to your heart as we do. And please welcome Ian.
How are we all? Good. All right. I hope you all enjoy tonight. Anyway, g'day, I'm Ian, and tonight I'll be your MC. It's going to be a magic night. We already mentioned the phone, so thanks for that courtesy. Now, there will be an intermission halfway. And a bit of comedy as well. And during the break and after the show, you're welcome to have a chat with any of the storytellers. First, we'll start the evening with Metamorphosis, a short story by Mina.
Story of something that happened to me a few years ago. It's quite personal, but I have a feeling that I'm quite okay to share it with you this evening. Metamorphosis. The process has already begun when out of nothing, something appears. My friend told me not to use the word nothing, but I say, why not? Nothing is amazing, because out of something, or out of nothing rather, something always appears. On August the 1st, 2010, I received a phone call from St Vincent Hospital. I was told that my dear mother had just had a second cardiac arrest and that I should make my way down to Sydney immediately. At the time, I was living in Tweed Heads. I remember it vividly. I'd been very ill with the flu. I also had no money, and for the past 2 weeks I was waiting on my tax return so I could go to Sydney and spend some time with my mother. I remember checking my bank on Friday and nothing. I had always also checked my bank on Saturday and still nothing. But on this particular morning, I looked up to the ceiling and waving my fist, said out loud, "That's it, God. That money had better be in my bank account now, because I'm on the next flight to Sydney to see my mother." I began to frantically pack some clothes, and I remember that I was just throwing in anything. I wasn't thinking about what to pack. Rather, I was thinking of how much of a cunt I was, or I had been towards my mother all the years that I had been with her. All I kept thinking about was what my mother used to say to me whenever I would kiss her on the cheek. "You don't love me," she would say. "You never kiss your Micah on the lips." Suddenly I began weeping hysterically. I kept thinking and saying over and over again, "Mummy, please hold on to me. I just want to kiss you on your lips to tell you how much I love you. I just want to see your little blue eyes one more time. Please, please hold on to me." Still weeping and thinking, I went into the bathroom to take a shower. The shower cubicle was all white, and I didn't notice anything unusual. Using very hot water, as it was still quite cold in August, I began shampooing my hair, still crying and thinking of what my mother used to say to me in regards to kissing her on the cheek. I turned to rinse the shampoo from my hair. Just as I did so, a large black moth appeared right in front of my face, fluttering around. Because the water was hot, I didn't want the moth to get hurt, so I opened the shower door and began to shoo it out. I stepped out of the shower to shoo the moth out, but the moth didn't seem to want to go. Just as I did this, all of a sudden, it was like slow motion. The moth fluttered around, did a 360-degree turn, and out of nowhere, hit me on my lips. It then landed on my dressing gown, robe that was hanging on the door. Stunned, when I looked at the moth again, it was full of colour, and there on each wing, were clearly looking at me, were two beautiful blue eyes. Suddenly I felt my whole face light up. I could feel the width of my wide, stunned smile. My heart was racing and filled with joy at the same time. A gift, a most incredible gift from Moy and Micah. I had a mobile phone on the bathroom basement and asked the moth if I could take a photo. The money was in my bank account and I booked the very next flight. Just as the plane came into land at Sydney Airport, I found out that my mother had had a third cardiac arrest and passed away. I went straight to the hospital and no one was there. But I got to spend a few sacred hours with my mother alone. I gently kissed her on the lips and told her how much I loved her. I gently opened her beautiful blue eyes. My mother's eyes were still there, but my Michael was gone. The experience of the moth was still there with me, and I thank my Michael for her most gracious and sacred gift to me. I probably shouldn't have ever shared this, but it's too late, I guess. I just couldn't keep it to myself. I am ashamed, but I'm also grateful. Out of nowhere, a moth appeared, a special message of love and tenderness from my Micah.
Story. Next we have a story from Deliri. It's titled The Woman from Bangalore. Tonight it will be read by fellow storyteller Mervyn. Life in a warm climate.
Good evening. Good evening. The Girl from Bangalore by Deliri. He was fair, young and handsome, with eyes grey as the clouds. Drunk on a foreign land, his hard-earned money begged to be spent. He entered a hallway, dark and sparsely lit, when she grabbed his hand, shouting, "Come quick, come quick." Unthinkingly, he followed her inside a cushy room. The girl, fat and pretty, he was in for a thrill. Her laughter like the sun, her eyes bright and shiny, Everything about her made him horny. He lay down next to her, hastily undressing, pulling down his trousers as she lay there and waited. Between her fat thighs, he soon spat his seed. In the midst of a drunken night was when she was conceived, the girl from Bangalore. She grew up straight and tall, a sight to behold, a flower from heaven, coveted by men rich and poor, young or old, different but the same, all wanting what they can't obtain. Her rich old benefactor waited impatiently, in a hurry for her girlhood to end. To the old goat, she was quickly wedded, only to be offered nothing more than pain. Her bruises and welts she kept well hidden beneath richly bejewelled dresses he had gifted to her. After he beat her without any restraint, he adorned her even more, but her spirit remained poor. She dreamed often of freedom, counting the days when it might occur. She finally ran away from her master and torturer, creating distance from the horror that was her life. Unsure of her future, she sat by the dirt road, begging in solitude, determined to never again be embraced by misfortune. A house of disrepute offered her some respite. All she had to do was to charm and be nice to patrons of the dwelling of ill repute. Men young and old all came money in hand when word got around, hoping to catch the favour of the stunning new girl with eyes like grey sand. She soon became the queen of this forbidden place. Her beauty and charms a fabric of many a tale. Years had passed, yet her beauty had not waned. Her days were spent among riches and vices, her dreams still unfulfilled, her heart as cold as ice. On one stormy night, a foreigner, old and weary, came with money-filled pockets, searching for new-found thrills. To her, his age did not matter, as she saw in his eyes as grey as hers an instant kindred spirit. She led him to her room where they both lay down. He was gentle and kind, kinder than all whom she previously had known. He lifted her dress slowly, entering her body tenderly. He spoke tender words that she couldn't understand, but his voice was soothing, compelling her to reach for his hand. She felt him spit his seed inside her slim thighs, holding her lovingly in his strong weathered arms. She watched him as he took his leave, quietly closing her bedroom door. And there she conceived, like she had been herself, another girl from Bangalore. Thank you.
Thanks, Mervyn and Deliri. As well as stories tonight, we watch stories told on screen. Our first film is from Stu. It's called Big Bill of the Cross.
In King's Cross, anything goes. It's all happening. I got to know the street life people and myself, a street seller of fashion jewellery. I had come to know 3 close friends off the street who are now deceased. They were Billy the Cap, Auntie Irene and Horse. In particular, Billy the Cap. I've known Bill for over 20 years. One evening, myself and Bill spent 2 hours in the restaurant having a nice meal and a coffee discussing our family lives. Bill had a mysterious family upbringing. His story starts with his mum and dad. They both met in Greece. His father was Irish, his mother was Greek. And they fell in love and when it came to the two of them wanting to get married, his Greek in-laws didn't agree with it because of custom. So in the end, Bill and his future wife decided to come to Australia. They'd never been to Australia. They ended up in Queensland, far north Queensland. His father paid for and acquired 30,000 acres in Queensland. His dad was a builder and a businessman. Bill arrived, and by the time Bill was 4 years old, his father was dead. His mother in shock. She could hardly speak English. His mother became hysterical and she ended up in an asylum. The 30,000 acres was confiscated, which is now where Townsville is built upon it. Bill, however, was in the care of nuns at a Catholic boarding school. He said he was almost punished daily for minor things like talking and childish things. But he was severely beaten for 2 years across his hand with a rule on the edge by these nuns. And he said he was so severe he ran away. And he put up with it for 2 years, and he ran down the road and he knew of a public school, and he knocked on the headmaster's door and he was crying and he pleaded for mercy if he could come and live with the headmaster, and he explained to him. And he was about 7 years old, but when he was 7 he grew up as an adult because he had no parents, no relations, no nothing, alone in Australia, but he was born here. The headmaster and his family took him on until he was about 15 years old, and he told the headmaster, look, it's time for me to leave, you've done enough for me, I'm going to get a job. So he found a job on a cattle station in real far north Queensland as a jackaroo. And after 4 years working there, Bill decided to move on. He heard about the big smoke. He'd never been to a city like Sydney, but the big smoke that he was referring to was Brisbane. The day he was about to leave, his boss, Big Bob, owed him about 4 years of wages. The boss asked him how much, and Bill replied about £300. And Big Bob says, well, told him, come back in the afternoon about 2 o'clock. He did, and when he came back, Bob had arranged 12 other jackaroos to beat Bill up, and that was his wages. So Bill crawled out of there with broken ribs, black eyes, bleeding, in pain, semi-conscious, and his friend, Matey, a young Aboriginal jackaroo, they both left together. They spent a month living in the bush until the time his ex-boss was about going on an annual agricultural show for 2 weeks. His boss would leave for 2 weeks. Bob and Matey went back to his boss's property, knew where he could find some dynamite in the shed, grabbed some and blew up the boss's safe and got £8,000 out of it. He gave Matey £1,000, they parted, he headed to Brisbane on foot. It took him 2 months to get to Brisbane. On the way, he was almost eaten to death by hundreds of thousands of mice and a plague. He says, luckily he had a pet, Jack Russell Terrier, that scared most of the mice away, but covered in infectious sores. If he didn't get them seen to, he would have died. But he ended up at a general store, bought some kerosene and dabbed himself with kerosene, and it worked, saved his life. And in the meantime, when the mice were eating them, they had about £1,000, so he was left with £6,000. He was still well off. He gets to Brisbane, lives with street bums, rents a nice 4-bedroom house for 2 years, parties on, gets drunk until the well runs dry. All his friends abandon him. He's on the street as a drunk and a pure bum and a street person by now. Gets arrested for disorderly conduct, a simple crime, sent to prison, to some type of prison farm where they broke sandstone and worked the sugarcane farms and duties. The farm was 300 kilometres inland from Brisbane. And every month they'd send a work party from this prison farm into the city. You had to become a what they call a trustee. Well, after 18 months, Bill and his friend planned it. They became trustees and they went to Brisbane for the first time. They're going over a bridge when they were in Brisbane, and that, because the old trucks in them days were only slow vehicles, it went over the hill, they jumped off and escaped, and an elderly lady hid them in her house. The police were searching everywhere. Every house, they came to her house and they showed her some photographs of Bill and his mate. She said, and they asked her if she'd seen these two men. She said, no, I don't know who they are. And then they left. Night time comes, Bill and his friend leaves the lady's place. She gave them a sack of food. And they both jumped on trains. They jumped in empty stock carriages to get to Sydney. They'd never been to Sydney before. They ended up in Sydney and they found out about this King's Cross, and that's where Bill's life started. But during this time in the Cross, Bill had been there, and even during the time I knew him, for 38 years, but he rang up his ex-boss to have a talk with him. And his boss says, so it was you, Bill? He says, yes. What are you going to do about it? He says, I'm coming to that King's Cross to kill you. He says, come down, I'll be waiting. So Bob comes down with 5 backups, 5 blokes, but he didn't know Bill had 12 blokes, and they all had guns. So did this Bob. In those 1930s, the gun laws were easy and carry a gun. I mean, not nowadays. And Bob arrives. He met Bill at the King's Cross fountain. It was a big shootout. This was in the 1930s. Bill got shot in the leg. I'd seen the wound on his leg, and that's what he eventually died of, infections. They all got shot, even Bill's friends, and fantastic enough, none of them died. And anyway, Bob left, and that was the last time Bill ever saw the bloke. Now that's all I can say about the story, and this story is a sad story because Bill never got to know his father and mother long enough. At the time of this discussion, he could never find any birth certificates of himself or the whereabouts of his parents or any evidence of how his father died or even where they are buried. And a lost inheritance as well, at 30,000 acres. I have a living friend called Tom Brown who finds missing persons. I think I may have a coffee and talk with him. That's it.
Thanks, Stu. Our next story is called Chloe by Linda.
On the way up. It was another wet winter's night in Sydney town. The rain kept pouring down, slicking over the pavements and eventually down into the harbour. People stumbled home from work in it, glad to be returning to the cosiness of 4 walls. Others took shelter in cafes, restaurants and bars, glad of a warm lighted place on a cold wet night. Under a bridge somewhere, 2 girls sat huddled up against the cold. "You got a light?" the older one asked a man who walked up. Suddenly she realised who he was. "Brad!" They threw their arms around each other, then they both began talking simultaneously. "So how have you been, Cat?" he asked eventually. "Pretty good, holding in there anyway." "Glad to hear it. You always did hold yourself together well." He turned to the other girl. "I haven't seen you around here before, love." "This is my friend Chloe." They shook hands. "So, what's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" "I don't know, really," the young girl replied shyly. "We could ask you the same thing," Brad Cat interjected. "What's a nice boy like you doing out and about on a night like this?" "Just bored, I guess," he replied casually. "Thought I'd check things out." "Well, you're always welcome here," Cat gestured behind her. "Pull up a milk crate." They all sat down, chatting away. Brad ended up taking quite a shine to young Chloe, asking her back to his place. I know it's not the Hilton or anything, but it is warm and dry there. Chloe hesitated. She may not have been on the streets for terribly long, but she knew what was really behind the offer. You should, Chloe, Cat cut in. He's a really good bloke. She thought about it. Thought about the pallet in the squat where they were staying, how drafty the old warehouse was. Not much of a choice, really. Chloe turned to him, led the way. All right. I parked down by the shopping centre. See you, Cat. She started walking after him. Her friend replied with a thumbs up. When Chloe woke the next morning, she had no idea where she was. She was lying on a couch in a strange room with a blanket thrown over her. The storm had blown away, bright sunlight was shining through the windows. Her head aching slightly, Chloe tried to remember. She had returned to his flat. Now she remembered sitting here. He had brought a couple of bottles, something to warm us up with. She remembered talking and giggling a lot. Then nothing. Chloe lay back and shut her eyes. Hello, she heard a man's voice some time later. Slowly she struggled into a sitting position. I didn't want to disturb you before, Brad told her. He went on to explain that he had just thrown the blanket over her and left her to sleep. Then he brought them some coffee. Chloe felt like she was in one of those old movies where the heroine wakes up in a strange man's place. Then the question is, did they or didn't they? She did find out the answer to that. She was fully clothed and had woken up that way. There was no internal soreness which told her everything she needed to know. After they finished their cuppers, Brad found a towel and showed her where the bathroom was. Then he politely suggested she use it. Showering is always invigorating, refreshes more than the skin. It also gave her a chance to think about the whole situation, especially what his motives were for taking her here. It cleared her head as well. A moment later she toddled out to where Brad was sitting in front of the television. She didn't know what to say to him, just sat down and started watching the morning news show. What do you want to do now? Chloe asked awkwardly. Yeah, Brad was fairly non-committal. He didn't have to go to work that day, so he was enjoying doing nothing much. So, do you want your pound of flesh now? She quoted her English text. Brad turned and stared to her. Now he was looking in the cold light of day. How old are you, kid? Old enough, Chloe snapped. I'll be 17 next month. This was true, but all the same she was still young enough that it hurt to be called a baby goat. In some ways, Brad replied, looking at the empty bottles on the coffee table significantly. He paused for a long time, obviously deep in thought. I'll tell you what we'll do, Brad said eventually. You can stay here as long as you like. Then when you feel like you're in the mood, you come and let me know. He patted her leg slightly. Chloe walked into the squat. Well, our little stop out has returned, Cat observed. Aye, Chloe replied nervously. Is that all you can say? How's Brad going? Actually, I need to pick up my things. Woohoo, moving in. She thought for a moment. Well, you're lucky. Brad's always a really tough bloke. Didn't take them long to pack up Chloe's few belongings. Then they sat down while Cat made some coffee on her small camping stove. Get this into you, soon be as warm as toast. There's something I want to ask you about, Cat. Far away. Chloe told her everything that had happened at Brad's. So I don't know what to do now. Cat was silent for a long time. Well, I haven't heard anything like this before, and I know what Brad's like. She thought a little longer. He must really like you. I wouldn't keep him waiting too long, though. She noticed the younger girl had buried her face in her hands. Chloe, what's the matter? Chloe couldn't have told her everything then. It would take many years to slowly and painfully extract the story, which certainly took its toll. Don't worry, sweetie. I think things are going to work out for you pretty good. She suddenly noticed that Chloe was crying. Quickly she grabbed her and held her. After a minute, Cat asked, All right, now tell me what's wrong. It hurts, Chloe sobbed. I suppose so, at first. Surely you were with Jason. Yep, and he was pretty rough. Man, Kat couldn't think of anything better to say for a long time. The way I look at it, you have a few choices here, she continued, gesturing around the large warehouse. Go back to your space here and unpack your shit. Then when the cold wind blows through here at night, I don't want to hear you. I don't have any spare blankets, and you can go and get an old paper. Or else you can go back to Brad's place and try to make a go of it. I guess that's it then, Chloe's voice was soft. Believe me, kid, you could do a lot worse. I know what Brad's like, quite a catch for you. She busied herself with making them another coffee. Why is it that all men only want that? Chloe sighed. Welcome to life in the big city, kid. That's what they all want. Kat remembered something then. It could be a lot worse though, if you think about it. Going out with Shelley, taking down number plates for her. What will you do when they want you to jump in the car? Chloe gasped. You knew about that? Of course, she told me. There's not much I don't know about around here. There didn't seem to be much more to say. They finished their cuppas and Chloe decided to head back to his place. She wanted to be indoors before the biting cold of the winter night arrived in a few hours. She gathered up her belongings. Kat gave us some parting advice. Just remember that you ain't the Virgin Mary and this ain't Christmas. Chloe was nervous as she headed for Brad's flat. Anticipation is like that. They were getting along okay, but there was always that tension between them. Understandable. He had kissed her once, but it was hardly Hollywood stuff. Now there didn't seem to be too much for them to say to each other. Brad told her a little about his day at work, and they settled down for another evening in front of the TV. Oh, he didn't talk much, anticipating her next move. Finally, Brad said something about more work in the morning. He took himself off to the bedroom. Now the time had come. Chloe steeled herself, she had to take the chance. She took a few more deep breaths and walked toward his room. Slowly, nervously, she tapped on the door. Yes, come in. She walked into the bedroom. Brad regarded her from under the covers. I just wanted to tell you. Suddenly she was nervous, tongue-tied. I think that it's time now. He stared for a moment. You're shivering. He pulled back the bed cover for her, then indicated the place beside him. Climb in. She did so, wrapped in the warm cocoon of doona and blankets. He did not touch her at first, until she had relaxed a little in its comfort. Brad began on her very slowly. Just relax. There's nothing to worry about, kid. She gradually seemed to as little as the touching went on and on. He was in no hurry. Soon they were gasping with the excitement of it all. They had agreed to meet at the outreach centre. G'day, Kat, she cried exuberantly. The girls embraced. Then Kat studied her for a moment. Was it as good as that? Chloe turned bright red, feeling as if she was standing in front of the whole world, still naked. How did you know? It's written all over you, sweetie. Look at the grin on your face. Well, you learn something every day. I was married once, Kat told her, smiling. I remember those days very well. So what happened? Oh, we eventually grew apart. Long story, really. He's up in Queensland now. That's sad. Suddenly Chloe looked worried. That's life, sweetie. Nothing lasts forever. In the end. She studied Chloe's face. Don't get upset about it, no point. I like to think that Brad and I could live happily ever after. Kat laughed. That's definitely a fairy tale. Every relationship has its honeymoon period, you'll see. My advice is to enjoy it while you can. Chloe could think of nothing to say. Kat looked around. What time did they serve lunch here again? The sad part was that for all Kat had done to bring them together, Chloe would eventually cut her off. She didn't want someone around who had previously slept with her boyfriend. Jealousy is a curse indeed. Chloe couldn't believe how lucky she was. Sometimes after they had made love at night, she would lay beside the sleeping Brad. She felt totally contented, happy with her lot for the first time in a long time. Other times she would climb out of bed. Still naked, she wandered over to the windows of the flat. Often that winter the wind would be howling outside or else the rain pounding against the windows. Chloe would think about how fortunate she was not to be out in that. She saw life differently to others, grateful for things that they took for granted, having known the cold embrace of the pavement. Smiling, she would return to their bed, cocooned in warmth and happiness. Her life would soon become more than enjoying the afterglows. One morning they had their first argument. Brad pushed her hands firmly away from the buttons of his good shirt. He snapped at her and would be late for work, which would be all her fault. When she protested, he told her that she should find a job. It's about time she started to help pay her way. Then he stormed out the door. Brad would apologise later for his impatience. By then, she had started to take his advice. For only a couple of weeks, Chloe had found a job at a local cafe. She was soon exhausted after her shifts. One bonus was the leftovers they let her bring home, saved on cooking for her man. It was to be her first step up. Society had banished people like her, young refugees from impossible family situations. It was quite happy to throw them on the scrap heap, then turn them into the problem. Chloe was fated not to live such a life. She would try to claw her way up with Brad by her side.
Well, now I'm going to introduce our next film, More Than Just Words by Michael, an exploration of language and what translation can do to it.
Winding back to an old-fashioned shack along the road to Gundagai, where the gum trees are growing and the Murrumbidge's flowing beneath the sunny sky.
The bus to Bondi Beach begins at the quay. It proceeds through town to Chifley and Whitlam squares. Australia was never conquered by the Romans. Neither of these are the four-sided spaces that the word implies.
Stand back, everyone.
No, are you getting on the bus?
No, I'm going to watch you.
Well, I'm getting on the bus.
Good on you.
Travellers bring back words that describe something serving the same or similar purpose, but that some variants, thus adding another level of meaning. Does calling crossroads a square add another level of meaning? Continuing along Oxford Street from College Street to Bondi Junction, it is one of the oldest routes in Sydney, formerly called South Head Road, stretching through 4 districts: Darlinghurst, Paddington, Woolloomooloo, Bondi Junction. South Head describes the destination. With an open border policy, people of many different nationalities, ethnicities and religions see themselves as citizens and want to contribute to the discussion. Many post-20th century arrivals have a developed and refined culture that they don't want to lose. Their language, Greek for example, which, like Aboriginal languages that are said to be also based in myths, derive enormous authority from acknowledging the land from which they grew. Glenmore Road, Paddington was undoubtedly the path used by Aborigines for many eons. It winds because bridle paths seek the easiest way around obstacles and hazards. Did Aborigines have a word for bridle path? With the horse and cart, it was just a matter of time before the bridle paths were levelled and paved for horseback riders, ox carts, carriages, and ultimately the car and buses. In January 1902, Lord Hopetoun addressed the West Australian miners threatening secession. The Commonwealth was the creation of the people who enjoyed the privilege of and must accept the duties of double citizenship. The internet is forcing us into ever-contracting monolithic worlds. As long as Australia has its roots in foreign soil, it's like an exotic pot plant and will not be secure until firmly planted in the earth. Approaching Bondi, you will notice a beautifully wide street, thoroughfare for want of a better word, cutting a swathe 6 lanes wide were it not for the median strip with lawns and flowering shrubs. Seen from a Roman perspective, it's like a highway, wide enough to move a large body of men in formation across the former sandhills, now housing. There's no triumphal arch that the Romans would have built to commemorate a victorious campaign, but then Australians will tell you they've never glorified conquest. What words comes to mind to describe such a grand piece of man's technology and engineering skills? Would you call it majestic? Might you call it a parade or a processional way? Simple Blair Street, formerly Sewer Road, until Mr. Joseph Blair wrote in 1914 to ask for the name to be changed. The reason that it's straight and wide is revealed in its former name. Aboriginals can learn a lesson from the British by appropriating the English language, and in the process adding to, rather than losing their culture. It could give them back their sovereignty by drawing together two mindsets on the same continent, but 12,000 miles apart, and create something truly original with Aboriginal roots. Because the sum of the parts contributes so much more than the individual components, until we have a way to reconcile the irreconcilable, double citizenship may be the way to make the connection. Australia needs to build their own language on their own distinctive rootstock, based in their own patch. To be worthy of the name, inclusive of how many hundreds of nationalities it claims citizenship, Australians need to understand each other. Myths can unite the whole mix, not just one group.
There's my mother and daddy a-waiting for me, and the pals of my childhood once more I will see, and no more will I roam, 'cause I'm a-heading right for home along the road to Gundy. Here we go.
Well done, Michael. Our next story comes from Ramon. It's called Like a War.
You all look fantastic tonight. Thanks for coming there with you. Thank you. Means a lot. I wonder at times. Books, you know, they can be so complex. I've always wondered as a child about books. Anyway, the title of my story is Like a War, by myself, Ray. The middle of the night, Ramon had awoken, distressed and anxious. The beginning and dawning of a new day. Would it hold? What would it bring? To the warrior who felt life was like a war. It just seemed like yesterday that the war had finished, but to him, the war was still going on. With his head beating like he had had a serious drink the night before, which he had not, the aspirin which he had brought the other day from the chemist, which was extremely overpriced, had eased the pain of the headache that he had the night before, which had caused him to be quite distressed and feeling unease. Looking through the window at 9 a.m. in the day, it seemed like the day was not going to end, with the rain pelting down and not stopping. He wished his best friend Mervyn from the war was still around, but what would never happen, as they had never spoken for a long time. After having his drink, which had eased the pain, he proceeded to have breakfast and found that it didn't have any milk.
However, this did not worry him, as he felt at ease with all of this and began to eat his porridge and feel full. Dressed up and ready and alert to go was his motto, for only one way was forward and not backwards. With the rain still going and his new umbrella, he proceeded to leave the door. Deciding not to catch a train, he proceeded to walk over to Redfern, through the city, with all of its characters and wonderful beings. Along the way he met interesting people, but knowing that he had to be over there by 12 o'clock to catch up with a cup of coffee with one of his friends, with his best friend by the name of Raymond, which he had not seen in a long time. With each step going, he felt more tighter and tighter, pushing the limits, pushing the boundaries. He knew he had to be there for Roman, just like he had been there in Vietnam in the war, with no beginnings, with no endings, just looking forward. As he arrived, he turned around the corner into the cosh's shop. No sign of Roman. Roman was not there. Typical same old, same old. Never on time, never there. However, he patiently sat down and ordered a cup of coffee in the shop. At the time of the day, no one seemed to be there, which was quite surprising to him, as he had always thought his friends would be there. But this day the rain was pouring down. It just wouldn't seem to stop and continued going and going and going. The time had passed so quickly, sort of like life, you could say. Quicker, quicker, faster, faster. The time moving. At that time, he began to realise that it was turning on 2 o'clock. He had another appointment to attend, which he wasn't looking forward to going to, with his best friend Joanne. Joanne was sort of like, you could say, an interesting character, sort of like a military sergeant, you could say. As he arrived into his office, politely and early and on time, but a bit unusual for him, but he was always trying to please her and make her happy, filling out her forms, answering her question, which always seemed to be open-ended, with no response for him to give his detailed response of what he thought. He was quite happy by this, however, just like the war, happy but sad and alone. He proceeded to ask her questions, but time was up with her. She gave him some useful advice about things, which he took into consideration, and they would end up meeting up again at another time, but this time as she booked for the next month, which he really wasn't very impressed, but he knew he had just to keep going and believing in himself. He decided that he would catch up with her at another time, as she had agreed to this, with no specific time set. Leaving from the office, he felt relieved and a tinge happy, knowing he would be well, but also concerned about the future circumstances. Swinging off to another idle walk, it would appear to some, but to him it was about moving forwards, growing, changing, living. He proceeded to enter the Broadway shopping centre, which was sort of like Hollywood on stilts, you could say, with its bright lights and its interesting characters, with tools and money flowing left, right and centre, sort of like a game, sort of like a challenge, sort of like a maze of bombs and grenades, but it had all beautiful bright lights and it seemed to appease and relax. He proceeded to go into the shopping centre. Amazingly, it was Target, and got what he needed, some new shirts and shoes, and proceeded to walk out 2 hours later, wondering where all the time had gone, just like his life, so fast, so quickly. He proceeded to walk out of the shopping centre. The rain appeared, though it had eased, thankfully. Would he walk back through Broadway, back home? No, he decided to jump on the bus. The bus would drop him off immediately near his home, which he was quite relieved, bringing it close about 6 o'clock at night. He dwindled and jumped onto his bed, exhausted and tired at the day. He then proceeded as it proceeded and happened. If only sometimes all of his days could be like this. After 2 hours he woke up from a sleep, a light nap you could say. He proceeded to cook himself a meal, turn on the radio, relax, and turn it slightly down and contemplate about life, its challenges, but above all about the war. The war is not really what you know it is. The most important thing is what really goes on in your heart. Thank you.
Thanks, Ramon. To close the first half of the evening, we have a film from Delirium called The Crunch, The Awakening of a Broken Dream.
The crunch. Roland. The car slid into the driveway, purring softly, and stopped. Roland pulled the keys out of the ignition, his mind fueled from all the bourbon and cokes at the local pub. He opened the front door of the house and stepped into the hallway. All the lights were on.
Stupid cow.
He thought.
He doesn't give a shit. She doesn't even have to pay the bills or work all day. All she does is sit on her ass, watch TV, feel sorry for herself and stuff herself with all the junk food she can lay her hands on.
He yelled out.
Hello?
But there was no reply. She probably was asleep on the couch or on the nursery floor in a fetal position, clutching a blue teddy bear for a child that never was. On these occasions, he usually covered her with a blanket. He went into the kitchen, glanced at the sink filled with dirty dishes, and opened the fridge door. It was filled with out-of-date food.
What a waste,
he said. He grabbed a beer and walked into the lounge room, dragging his right leg. Working 7 days a week was getting a bit much, but it got him away from her. Sheila was in a lounge watching a reality TV show, her eyes glued to the screen. She turned towards him, barely acknowledging him. He plunked himself in his favorite armchair, reached for the remote and surfed the channels.
What'd you do that for?
Sheila objected.
You've had all day to watch that crap?
Roland curtly replied as he opened his beer can. Cricket was on, England versus the West Indies. Out of nowhere, distant memories of the two of them on a tropical island entered his mind. How pretty had she been back then, her slim body and her shining hair framing her face like a living Mona Lisa. Her laughter then had made him swoon. It seemed like centuries away. His mind reverted back to the cricket, but he was still observing her from the corner of his eyes.
Jesus, you've let yourself go,
he thought. Her body, once so tantalizing, now left him chaste and cold. He guzzled on his beer. Sheila sat with her shoulders hunched, hair strung around her puffy face. Her loose dressing gown offered Roland a glimpse of her large stomach and now saggy breasts. Roland knew that he had too much to drink that night, but he was past caring. He needed the courage. He needed to tell her that he had had enough. Enough of her uninspiring, laughless body and her muted rejection. She made him feel useless and unloved. Her medication had turned her into a zombie. An ad came on selling happiness to a happy family in the form of a packet of instant casserole mix. Those ads really pissed him off. Sheila. Sheila heard the front door open. It was late, past midnight. She wondered how drunk he was. She heard him go into the kitchen for a beer and waited. He came in the lounge and muttered a brief hello. She didn't reply. She felt his eyes upon her. His gaze goes right through her like a butter slicing with a blunt knife. She didn't want to look back at him. She mildly objected when he changed the channel, but his sharp reply silenced her. Everything about herself depressed her. Her fat body, her once shiny hair, now lifeless and unkempt. Her deep blue eyes, once cheeky, were now lifeless and dull. She didn't bother to dress up anymore, except to visit her doctor. A pink, well-worn dressing gown was her daily habit. She hated herself. She recalled the vivacious woman she had once been, surrounded and loved by family and friends. Roland had loved her then. Just the memory of his touch at times made her cry. She had been prescribed antidepressant after many miscarriages, the last one the most painful and soul-destroying. The baby, a boy, the son they had both so badly wanted, but were both so cruelly denied, was almost full term. She tried to smother her pain with medication. Her dosage increased, leaving her in a zombie-like state. She looked at Roland. He had always been there for her, holding her close to him, rocking her gently when she had spent countless nights sobbing with grief, not letting go of her until she would fall into a deep sleep, totally exhausted. But they had never really spoken about their tragedy. At one of the few grief counseling sessions, Roland opened up only once. He spoke about how much he cared about her and how he wanted them to move on with their lives. She didn't want to move on. She wasn't ready. She just wanted to wallow in her pain and grief. She resented him for his outburst. However, she felt a sudden urge to talk to Roland, to find out how he felt about her, about them. She suddenly snatched the remote and switched the TV off. The talk. When Sheila switched the TV off, Roland sat up with a start. He stared at her. She stared back at him, and from deep within her, her voice emerged, stronger and commanding.
We have to talk,
She said. After a short while, Roland replied.
Talk?
Yes, talk.
Sheila said.
Talk about what?
Talk about us, about you, about me.
What about us?
Roland replied cynically.
You, me, us.
What do you want to say?
Sheila took a deep breath and tried to stop herself from crying. She was going to get answers, no matter what.
What do you want to do, Roland?
What do you mean, what do I want to do?
What do you want to do with our lives? Tell me what do you want?
Roland froze. He had had all the answers just a while ago, but now somehow they had all evaporated. He finally spoke in a soft, humble, almost inaudible voice.
I just want you to be happy.
Sheila was taken aback. She also had wanted them to be happy, but somehow she had lost her way, lost the trail to happiness. As she searched her mind for a reply, Roland spoke again.
I know we've been through some tough times, Sheila, but I think we both have suffered enough. We're both getting on. I want a chance at happiness in our lives again, and I want it to be with you.
Sheila felt guilty. She had half drowned in sorrow and grief, surfacing from time to time to catch a breath of life, only to be swamped over again. She was exhausted.
I was thinking more of you.
She said.
I can't imprison you in my pain any longer. I know you need me, but you also need me to be well. I haven't been there for you for a long time. It's all my fault. God knows how hard I've tried after we lost the little one, but I failed. I am an empty shell overborne by a longing for death. I feel wrapped in a shroud of despair. It's suffocating me like a slow death, no matter how that never comes, no matter how much I wish it would.
So what do you want me to do?
Roland asked.
Do you want me to go? Is that what you want?
No!
Sheila shouted.
I couldn't bear to live without you. I'd rather die. I don't have the courage to do away with myself, so I just hang on, making your life a living hell because I'm a coward. Too cowardly to end it all and set you free.
Oh, fuck this, Sheila.
Roland retorted.
Don't talk shit like that. Why do you think I'm still here? I love you and I worry about you all the time at work, at the pub and in my sleep. Everything else in my life just passes me by. I want you with me, but I just don't want to fucking do that. Sometimes my heart leaves me, just thinking you won't be there anymore. Please tell me what you want from me.
Sheila didn't reply. She stirred from the couch and walked out of the lunchroom.
Where are you going?
Roland cried out.
I need a cuppa. Do you want one?
Yes, I'd love one.
Roland answered. Sheila returned with the tea, handed him his cup and sat back on the couch. They both took a sip and looked at each other silently. Tears were streaming down Sheila's face, but she pretended they weren't there.
It's been a long night, love.
Roland said.
Why don't we get some sleep and talk about this again tomorrow when I'm not so tired?
All right,
Sheila said.
but promise me we will talk.
I promise you, love. I promise.
They both closed their eyes and listened to the silence. When Roland opened his eyes again, Sheila was fast asleep, her cap still in her hand. He got up, removed her cap, grabbed the blanket and covered her. He softly caressed her head and felt a strong urge to hold her. Instead, he took himself to bed. God, he was tired. He collapsed onto their bed. His heart had it. He closed his eyes and Sheila appeared. Not as she was now, but as she had been. A sweet, lazy smile spread across his lips.
I think I'll take a sickie tomorrow.
He thought and soon fell asleep.
Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have named you. You're so like the lady with the mystic smile. Is it only 'cause you're lonely they have blamed you for that Mona Lisa strangeness in your smile? Do you smile to tender lovers, Mona Lisa?
Hi everybody. Well, I hope everyone had a really good, refreshing time during the interval. Charged their glasses up and had a few good lives and everything. And get back now to the rest of the stories, which I hope you people will read for now. So the final stories of the night, we're going to start with a film by Nina called Pirate Captain Ship.
Now here's an interesting person I know. He lives alone by the sea, a solo quirky capitano. We met some long years ago at the Norfolk Hotel in Sydney, Surrey Hills in 1989, I believe. At the time, he appeared to me to be this crazy, hypochondriac, velocity-driven artist, and I believe he still is. We lost touch as friends in 1993 or thereabouts, and I got back in touch with him again about a year ago here in Sydney. He calls me Cook Lucky. In fact, he calls everyone Cook Lucky, which means Dolly. He's a pretty cool guy, mad, but he's okay. He does have his obsessive moments though, that much I can tell you. He's a talker, and he loves to talk. He always has a story to tell. Yada, 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 blah, 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 on and on, ad nauseum at times. And don't get him started on his mind's inability to keep still. He's a collector, a hoarder of sorts. His time is thoroughly occupied. And dancing he adores. He adores dancing so much that one time at a club he once ran in Surrey Hills, he was so full of rage and anger at a particular person that was there, and in order to express this anger without strife, he willingly maimed his own hands whilst performing the Zorba solo, hitting his hands over and over again so hard on this old wooden floor that the cafe owner downstairs freaked out and banging loudly broom-handled the ceiling. He damaged his right hand for good doing that dance. That's how much he loves dancing.
What happened? Breaking the floor with my hand, but dancing superbly. Well, superbly.
He has beliefs and rituals embedded so deeply into his psyche that if he doesn't perform them on a daily basis, he falls into a stupor of sorts. Get fucked, would ya? Leave me alone, fuck ya. Are words he uses constantly to finish his sentences with. But I don't mind. He is who he is. Apiritus.
Yep.
Pirate first and foremost, and then he is an artist. Baranga. Sailing his own papuri on the seas alone. He's someone I know. And Daxi, Yasu Piritus, Capitan.
Thanks very much, Mina. I'd now like to introduce Michael and his story called Slavery, a Romance.
In 1990, the government changed, and I'd worked down here at the correspondence school for 20 years, and I was put back into the, well, I was put into the classroom, age 56, this was, this story came out of that. I lasted a bit over a year and a third, I think, before I discovered something. It's a bloody disgrace. With all that machinery, Mr. Wood sees any lessening of teacher authority as a threat. How are we going to prevent accidents if we allow mayhem like that? Mayhem, aka chaos, enables creativity, says Frank, the latest to join the art team 2 floors above. He sees flights of imagination and playfulness as the very essence of art. He blames the lack of initiative and self-discipline in his students on the disproportionate influence industrial commands. Oh, you can't even control a single student, let alone a class, says management, appearing from nowhere. Management believes that state education can hold its own against the private schools that proliferate in the area. Frank, product of that system, knows that support in a school where fees are high is just not here. With only 400 students in the school, subject departments are small. The staff rooms spread around the rambling beachside high school easily become bastions of attitude. Usually harmonious enough, today all are in a state of conflict. This staff room accommodates 5 teachers: art, Frank Johnson; careers, Mr. Bridges; commerce, Ethel Economou; music, Mrs. Quaver; and PE, Miss Miles. Miss Miles, Barbie doll pretty, is scarcely a couple of years older than the senior students. Her hot pink tracksuit sets off the honey golden skin. She radiates good health and condition and is adored by just about the whole school. An exception to Miss Miles's fan club is Frank Johnson. He deplores the way she distributes the blue slips. 5 merits gets the recipient a pink one. Afternoon tea with the principal. She gives a merit certificate for just participating. Can he really be bothered entertaining those little aspirants? She should let students come to their own decisions and not persuade or manipulate by enticements. A stupid idea to allow it in the first place, Cecile Shimmy grumbles. Contrary to the official policy, management told new students at the beginning of the year, get down hard on Year 7 right from the start. You'll make your job a lot easier. Why did Year 7 want the auctioneer so badly? Frank ponders. At his former school, the staff made every effort to make the transition from primary as easy as possible. Maybe it was primary schools themselves, or is it the way they are treated here? Ethel Economou has just come in from her early morning dip. It's beautiful at this hour before the day gets hot and pressure builds. Ethel studies her face and starts to apply makeup. Thoughts turn towards Alan. The boy may have great magnetism, but lacks ambition. She questions if he should seek a place at neither. Today will certainly test him. It's almost 8 o'clock, Eth. I thought you had all that marking to do. It's nothing less than slave labour, this working early till late every day. Bert Economou sympathises. Ethel's husband is the perfect partner, if not sometimes a little too predictably dull. Over the years when she needed a bit of a fling, marking had occasionally provided a convenient alibi. Nothing to destable the marriage. She wouldn't want to hurt Bert. Ethel wonders what clothes Alan might wear. There are those of her father's she's been meaning to give to Vinnie's. They would never fit Bert, but will create the right character for the auctioneer. I think I'll drop off Dad's old clothes on my way to schools, Ethel says. Bert wonders at her deviousness. As Ethel speeds towards the school a couple of kilometres away, and while Grant is out on the oval practising his kicking, Alan is still in bed. The HSC exams have not been going well for Alan. It's not that he isn't bright. Mesmerised by the CNN coverage of Operation Desert Storm, he just hasn't been able to apply himself. Get up, Al, or you'll be late, his mother says, coming in to draw the blinds. Come on, son, this is your big day. He rolls over and buries his head under the pillow. His mother looks up at James Dean on the wall in despair. It's his bloody father who's to blame, she thinks, walking out on us like he did, the no-good bastard. What kind of a role model does he provide? Grant lives next door to Alan. He's such a different character, not as bright as Alan, but he succeeds at everything he does. Mind you, he only attempts things in which he's likely to succeed. His clear sense of morality comes from a secure home, a sound mind and healthy body, and a regular attendance at chapel. Some think he's too self-righteous, but being in the school's football team, he's never short of admirers. He thinks Alan's a bit of a wanker, but a sense of fair play means that he tries to treat everybody equitably. The school hall is typically 1960s school architecture, with a plain proscenium frame enclosing the stage. Sagging maroon velvet curtains pushed to either side, and black drapes hanging across the back in irregular folds. Cream-coloured walls lighten the room. Stacks of plastic black, green, red, brown chairs line the walls at the back. A row of collapsible chairs dominates the stage. Mrs. Economou goes down to check out the hall. She asks everyone to be there on time. Alan isn't there. Grant walks by. Oh, Grant, see if you can find Alan for me. Slave Day is one of the high points in the school's social calendar. It is organised and run entirely by students. By offering themselves as slaves for one day, Year 12 will raise money for their end-of-year formal. Teachers will be tolerated only for their potential bids. Mrs. Economou is prepared to enjoy the occasion. The new science teacher, Miss Chimmy, though, is nervous. It's her first experience of not having the weight of authority behind her, the threat of time out, and the whole school discipline policy backs it. Mrs. Economou leads the way to the back of the hall, placing a couple of plastic chairs side by side. What's the feeder school to this place? Are they open plan or traditional? They don't go for fancy ideas here, but it isn't for these once big fish. It isn't easy for these once big fish to readjust to becoming very small fish again. The principal is new, only started this year. Don't know anything about him. I like him. Did you hear him suggest that they introduce a vertical structure? Not one person agreed. Well, just that new art teacher, what's his name? Oh, you mean Frank Johnson? He won't last. Vertical means a house system, you know, where they mix the years together. We learned about it at college. They reckon it's the way to go. Oh, damn fool idea. One to listen to is management, not him. She wields the power. He'll be gone in a year or two, but she's hanging out for the top job. I'd stick with her. They told me down at the office that there are over 50 different nationalities. I believe in multiculturalism. Are we expected to supervise? Miss Chinny whispers after a tray of black magic. The older woman brushes aside the proffered chocolates. Having been recruited from, sorry, I've just put eye drops in and it's all going a bit blurry. Having been recruited from school, she has been locked into a lifetime of fortnightly superannuation contributions. That takes discipline and commitment. Tall, slim and athletic, she looks smart in her shiny green tracksuit and Reeboks. She has devoted a lifetime to keeping herself in condition. No, thank God, we're here to ensure that things don't get out of hand. Cecile Shimmy is short and overweight. She's dressed in blue jeans and a t-shirt with "Yes" printed across her bouncy bosom. Graduating in science with a mediocre degree, she's hoping to find a job in cosmetics or food technology. She's thankful to be able to get work anywhere. She's casual. The car is her only commitment. She cannot imagine being committed for a whole lifetime, neither to job nor man. The house she shares with friends in Newtown, they rent. When she has money, she spends it on travel. Ever since the 1789 bicentenary, the French Revolution, students have been unmanageable. Not even the transfer of the teacher responsible or the introduction of a stricter regime has brought them back into line. Storming of the Bastille may be suppressed, but it is not forgotten by years 9 and above. The school sits cross-legged on the floor. Year 7 occupies the front. Like Miss Shimmy, it's their first exposure to non-academic whole school entertainment. At informal moments, these students are perfectly at ease. Their manner with each other is relaxed and sociable. The discomfort of sitting on the bare floor is hardly noticed. When Alan walks slowly onto the stage a metre above the floor, dressed for the occasion in brown check flannelette shirt, a broad leery tie, and his own jeans, the hall falls silent. Alan's manner is formal and understated. His dark hair is slick and shiny as his highly polished tan shoes. Before beginning proceedings, he warns that slaves will be at liberty to refuse any personal or inappropriate demands. He announces the first item. Students, make a bid of $2. They can do your homework for you. None but the keenest students bothers with homework. Devoid of any promotional skill, they dishearten everyone. The girls withdraw without a bid. Nobody worries too much at a slow start. The longer it takes, the more lessons they'll miss. More teachers would extol the virtues of equality and enterprise in their lessons, but the couple seated near at the back is capable of remarkable inconsistency. The wooden floor, though, is starting to be felt. A few make a move towards the chairs. "Return to your places, please," says Miss Shimmy, as though she were being personally threatened. Sit down, reiterates Mrs. Economou, dispensing with niceties. Muttering and grumbling, the students turn back while Alan announces the next pair, a couple of board riders. Being so close to the beach, good surf is held in high esteem. These boys are good looking and popular. From many hours spent on their boards, they are fit and bronze. They don't have to do anything for the bidding to quickly reach $15. For such an outlay, when the boys do nothing but sit demurely, the audience grows impatient. A paper aeroplane flies through the air. Alan has trouble with the microphone. "Get on with it!" somebody shouts from the floor. The senior school appreciates Alan for his public speaking skills, but as an actor he's feeling his way. Images of missiles flying through the Kuwaiti night, the dark screen exploding into white as the target is hit. The auctioneer's mouth twists. He tugs at his hair, racks his brain. For another $10, the boys will, forgetting his own limitation, remove something of their clothing. Who the fuck does he think he is calling us boys? On the beach, they don't give a second thought to removing their wetsuits, but they're newcomers to the art of striptease. Even if boys they aren't, this is school and the hall is the place to be respected. Very lazily they start untying their shoelaces. So it means there could be staff reductions, Mrs. Economou. Not could. There's no doubt some will have to go, even before the end of the year. Land tax. Many families can't afford to live in this area anymore. Ethel leans across and helps herself to a chocolate. No more of this, Mrs. Economou, please. Call me Ethel. And you, Ethel, please call me Cecile. For his part, the auctioneer is gaining confidence. He feels bold enough to push for a little more. And having agreed to remove something of their clothing, it's hard for the surfers to know where to draw the line. Teachers can be inconsistent, and punishment or humiliation would easily follow. Their discomfort only adds to the audience's excitement. A fair number of the students' parents are shopkeepers. The kids have to take their turn behind the counter where they are aware of the tricks people employ to get more for less. They identify with this smooth coercion, are surprised at the satisfaction they derive from it. For just $10, they agree to take off their shirts. The hall goes quiet as the boys slowly undo their shirts. A roar of delight ejaculates from the audience. Feeling they have done enough for the end of the year formal, the boys board riders retreat, gathering up shoes and shirts as they exit from the stage. The next slaves to appear are the school band in wraparound shades, colourful tops and happy pants. Musicians are more experienced in dealing with audiences, less gullible than surfers, used to being the centre of attention fully clothed and appreciated for their music. They're above resorting to gimmicks. They dismiss the auctioneer's smarmy suggestion to take off anything more than the shades. An apple core lobs on the stage beside the auctioneer. Having been working overtime, he's fast getting tired and desperate. In a flash of inspiration, he looks up to a group of young teachers to the one side of the hall and appeals. "Teachers, they will wash your car for you." $20 is an immediate response. A wave of excitement surges through the audience. It's Miss Miles. You know, she gave everyone who entered the swimming carnival a merit certificate. I thought they were only given for some above average action or contribution. I always give one to whoever gets my lunch. It's worse, I tell you. And it's just like giving a waiter a tip. Miss Miles' bid, offered at a low point of proceedings, energises the hall and makes everybody feel happier. Students turn and beam at her. Her bid brings the musician's price up to an acceptable level. In turn, she beams back at the students she clearly loves. After an hour or so, the last slave is sold. And now, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing more for me to do than to declare the feeling of disappointment is universal. The occasion has been diverting, and I suppose that's it then, says Cecile. Wait, who knows what could happen? Before Alan can complete his sentence, Grant leaps onto the stage. The nuggety footballer snatches the microphone from the retreating auctioneer. Not so fast, you scoundrel. It's your turn to be auctioned. A loud cheer rings out. Cecile turns to Ethel. During the morning, the desire for flesh had been subtly massaged, if not exploited, by the auctioneer. Isn't it strange how they feel such animosity towards Alan, a lovely boy? He has his moments. I've known him since he first arrived in Year 7. Returning to class may be unavoidable, but the whole school welcomes delaying a return to class. The avenging Grant wastes no time on refinement. Get it off, he demands, and the poor auctioneer begins to fumble with his tie. Not the tie, man, the shirt. Turning to the audience with a dramatic blazing eyes, he begins to shout, "We want flesh! Flesh! Flesh!" The chant is taken up on the floor. Flesh! We want flesh! How on earth did they remove his shirt and leave the tie, Cecile says. The auctioneer edges away from his assailant, trailing the shirt behind. Just before he disappears into the wings, Grant sees him. The tie, though, leads to his undoing. Grant snatches it and drags him back to centre stage. For a starting bid of just $20, you can have the auctioneer without his pants. Year 7 springs to action. Their activity is feverish. Pooling their tuck shop money, they become a syndicate. Contributions pour in from all the older students all around, boosting the young enthusiast's bid. All that wonderful energy and intelligence working for all it's worth. Were they half so motivated in class? Too soon lost. Year 7 is only just managing to keep ahead with the bidding. Any advance on $35? Going once, going twice. If there are no more bids, for the last time, feverish counting Year 7 leader waves his hand. Wait a sec! Counting out the coins. Oh my God! Year 7s have him, squeals Cecile in delight. It's the highest bid of the day. $37.50, approves Ethel. Must be a record. The auctioneer submits. Demurely, he turns his back to the audience. Guarding his modesty with his shirt in his left hand, he undoes his belt. His jeans drop but stick midway, mid-thigh. Off! Get them off! Shouts the footballer. The place is in an uproar. The auctioneer turns to face the hall, adjusting the foil to cover his crotch. Unsympathetically, Grant gestures to a couple of hefty girls. Off! 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 The girls drop to their knees. Alan looks nervously as they tug the last obstruction. He falls backwards, but is caught. Not bothering to undo the laces, the girls, like a pair of attack dogs, tug and jerk, finally flinging the shoes into the hall. The pants slip off. Coup de grace. The auctioneer stands exposed, slick hair amiss, necktie hanging askew. the shirt his only concession. Oh, the poor boy, says Cecile, turning to Ethel. She is astounded to see the tip of her colleague's tongue protruding in a most unladylike fashion. Oh my God, gasped Ethel. What I wouldn't do to have a piece of him. Spellbound, Ethel reaches towards her companion's lap and gropes for a comforting orb of sweetness. Year 7 are eager to lay claim to their acquisition. They surge forward as one. The auctioneer's escape is blocked by his minders behind. His eyes are wild. His breathing accelerates. Beads of sweat form a moustache along his upper lip. Like a cornered kangaroo, he arches his back, swings one way, then another. The 12-year-olds surge forward and upwards. There is only one way out. Alan takes a superhuman leap over them into the hall. The momentum carries him on, and as he skids over the polished floor, before he knows it, he collides with the seated teachers, sending the tray of chocolates flying and knocking the ladies themselves to the floor. On her back, the stunned Ethel thinks her dream has been answered. She makes a grab at the lovely young man. Instead of tumbling gently into romantic slow motion into her passionate embrace, she finds he's escaped. All she has is his sweaty shirt. The rest of the school pursues its quarry as he flees naked outside the side door. Ethel inhales the masculine smell. She tries to press the shirt to her bosom, but finds it's caught. She wrenches. Cecile clings to the other end. Ethel leaps up and sets off into hot pursuit. By the time she reaches the playground, siren sounds, and Alan disappears through the fence. The wailing brings her back to the reality. She turns to see Cecile puffing across the oval towards her clutching trophy. "We'd better get back, Miss Jimmy," says Mrs. Economo. "You've got all those assignments to mark." "Back to your classrooms, everyone, quickly!" In the staff room, some teachers doubt their capability to win back any hard-won affection and loyalty. With his dull, repetitive delivery, Mr. History is unable to engage even the keenest student. Little more than 1 year ago, the school's French department celebrated the French bicentennial with an acclaimed dramatisation. The memory of those sans-culottes storming the barricades is enough to give him palpitations. Revolution should remain in the pages of history, not brought to life for the advancement of the ambitious. As Year 7 surges up the corridor to Frank's atrium, Al tears down James Dean and hammers Frank Woodley in his place. The end. If stories like this appeal to you, then see my poster on the wall outside where I've got some reproductions of paintings that I painted from memory 10 years later or something at the same time at the same school.
That's a rather interesting story. Your life has changed, hasn't it? Thanks, Michael. Anyway, we're getting close to the end of the night now. We've only 2 more performances. Up next, we have a story by Mervyn. This is called From the Ashes of a Broken Home. This is a tale about separation of a boy who dared to dream from the ashes of a broken home.
true story. From the Ashes. The boy who dared to dream from the ashes of a broken home. From the Ashes is about an 8-year-old boy's challenge to make sense of the calamities which pervade his comfort zone in the wake of the dissolution of his parents' relationship. The eldest of 4, he finds himself reluctantly cast into the role of silent moderator. Not appreciative of this facet, he leans on his precocious sister for stability. Together, they negotiate the bumpy road that separation is. Having overheard the nature, dialogue and discourse of his parents' conversation, the boy is compelled to decide what may be best for his own survival. Armed with the advice of his twin sibling, he makes a decision which would, unbeknownst to him, determine an outcome greater than that which he himself could ever have imagined. He hated the thought of separation. He loves his parents equally. He hates his parents equally, especially when they decide to do something like this. He has been dictatorially made aware of his mum's desire to take the kids and start a new life. He understands his mother, per se, but he doesn't agree. His education has been limited by non-attendance at school. He loves school, but mum keeps him home often, on a whim under the guise of illness. The boy is challenged academically, but seems interested in intellectual pursuit. Without permission from his parents, he declares his intent. He chooses to stay with Dad. Upon hearing this, his father is moved emotionally, happy to be the elect, but surprised and saddened that Mum has misrepresented herself to the kids. The boy becomes the target of a tirade of verbal abuse from her. His grandmother is in support of her notion. He suddenly feels abandoned by them both. They iterate the notion that his dad, your father, as they now refer to him, is a bad man. The grandmother waxes philosophically. Your father is always working. My daughter can't love a man who works all the time. But the boy doesn't like that answer. He doesn't understand adult talk anyway. He surmises. Dad might always be at work, but when he is home he carries me on his shoulders and tickles me and he makes me laugh. And he makes us the best cakes and biscuits. The father disciplines the boy in a gentle way, but doesn't spare the rod. Meanwhile, his sister has cottoned on to proceedings. Realising the toddlers will be going with Mum, she makes a stand defiantly. She loves and respects her mother, but she knows her father will do anything for her. But that is just the nature of their close relationship. She also does not appreciate anyone but herself reprimanding her elder brother, not even Dad. She states out loud, "I'm sorry, Mummy, I can't leave him by himself," referring to the boy. She is then instantly subjected to a barrage of shocking verbal abuse from both mother superiors. That was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's you-know-what. The mother then decreed to all and sundry neighbours, at the top of her vocal range, "Go with your father then. You can all get beat." A new beginning. The boy's new life begins in a place called Woolloomooloo. He meets city kids for the first time in his life. All is not well. City kids are a different breed to country kids. They are rudimentary and belligerent, and they love victims. Especially new kids. They make the best captives. The boy becomes their next meal. He is embarrassed and keeps things to himself. He doesn't want to mention it to his dad because that is who they are using to belittle the boy. Your dad is a homo. Our dads will kill him. They have guns and they will shoot him. He now feels sorry for his dad and angry with his kids. But he knows not to respond. He remembers what Dad said to him. Something about sticks and stones breaking bones, but he couldn't remember it all. But he is really afraid of these people hurting his dad. He takes responsibility for his plight and decides to suffer in it. The maturation of the young boy had begun. The years rolled by ever so slowly. The boy's grades suffered to the extent that his father was called in to explain the deplorable results. Not a worse report could be tendered to a principal. The boy was in continual war with the others, and had become such a victim of bullying that his behaviour had become erratic. He was now looked upon as a follower of the bad group. This does not reflect well upon his parenting. Father was remonstrated and warned of future consequences. The subnuclear family now had a real problem, and they had their first crisis talk. How's school going, son? Oh, good, Dad. Why is that? Because the kids pick on me all the time, and I hate it, and the teachers don't help me either. I understand, son. I'm sorry that you have to put up with all that stuff. Dad, boy endeared, remember you told me not to strike another person? Yes. What do I do when they touch me? Have they touched you? Yes, Dad, they try to beat me up, but they can't do it. Why not, son? Because they aren't as strong as me. Dad, if I hit the people who hit me back, will you be angry with me? No, not at all, son. There comes a time when you have to do things as a matter of survival, and that sounds like one of those times. Thanks, Dad. The boy burst into tears, and his dad comforted him. Are you okay, son? No, Dad. What's the matter, my puppy? I'm dumb, Dad. I'm the dumbest in the class. His tears and his tone erupted from somewhere deep in his heart. His father recognised instantly his son needed encouragement. Don't worry, son. You know what? We haven't even started that learning program I told you about years ago. Do you remember? Yes, Dad. The boy was full of spirit again. Are you ready to start? Yes, Dad. So what do you want to be when you grow up? A doctor, Dad. Alarm bells went off in the father's head, and he remembered telling the boy once that whatever he chose to want to be when he grew up, his dad would support him in every way, no matter how long it took. Well, we'd better start learning about being a doctor, eh, son? We'll leave it up to Dad, and I will get all we need ready for you. Thanks, Dad. By the way, son, if someone hits you, it means you were not sharp enough to duck out of the way. Do you want to learn that stuff too? Yeah, Dad, that would be mad. Excuse me, Dad, what are you cooking for tea tonight? Your favourite dish, son? They're all my favourite dishes, Dad. Told you. The following is my recipe for making a doctor on a limited budget. Recipe for making a doctor. This is a recipe I concocted using basic items to mix and mould into a palatable delight. List of ingredients. We have 17 ingredients. I'll read them out. The first ingredient we'll need is love. Then peace. We'll need some courage. We need one child of any nationality. One responsible, reliable adult, male, female, or alternative lifestyles. One abode. If of no fixed abode, a cave or a tent will suffice. Books. Use your favourite book. I used Harry Potter in this recipe. One chess set. A puppy or a kitten. The internet. Herbs and spices. Promises to be kept, often considered a healing herb or a soothing spice. Holidays. Time. Visits to museums, libraries, art galleries, movies and fun parks. And the 17th ingredient is a musical instrument. Now we get to the method of preparation. This is a very simple dish to make once you have gathered all the ingredients. Combine all of the above in a very large bowl of happiness. Be careful to ensure books are well read before adding the internet. Failure to do this may render books obsolete in the child's mind. Make sure promises will be kept. This will ensure a fair outcome. Next, add some healing herbs. Now you may choose whatever herbs you wish. I have used the following. 5 herbs. Common sense, a heaped helping of. Hope, a dash of hope. Third herb is empathy. Now you can never use enough of that. 4 patience, a sprinkle. And the 5th herb is tolerance. We'll need a load of that. Next, add the soothing spices. 4 spices. The first spice is a loving discipline. A dollop or 2. 2, gentle persuasion. A whisper of. The third spices are fun. We'll need tons of that. And the last spice is laughter, and we'll need a bucket full of laughter. Adding the herbs and spices together works well with this particular recipe. Now, next, we pour an infinite amount of love, and you can never use enough of this, into the mix and blend well. This will help bind the ingredients and render the situation much easier to work with. Now, we place the bowl in a safe place, cover and allow mixture to rest for an hour. Set a spell, put your feet up and have yourself a cup of coffee. Okay, now which is the magic television, we're going to advance the hour, and now we get to the baking method. And nearly over. Okay, now we need to pour the contents of the bowl into a loving home and bake slowly in the moderate oven of light for approximately 23 years. But that is how long it takes to make a doctor. However, I must concede this is an experimental recipe that's been simmering away now for 16 years. And the last time I checked, I could see that things were beginning to rise for the boy who dared to dream. Thank you. And I would like... But I was hoping that that boy who did dream is here tonight. Is he? At the back. Hello. Would you like to come down?
You must admit, that was so special and brave, and I really recommend the inspiration going into that story. We're a community together, and I think magic has touched us all tonight. But there is still one more. Now we come to the final film of the night, which I hope everybody enjoys. This has had a lot of fun, and I think everybody has really enjoyed themselves working with this. It is called A Manly Fairy Tale, a small film about mishaps and skullduggery on a manly ferry. G'day, I'm Ian, and this is a little bit of a story about New Year's Eve where part of it's happened and a part of it is probably a little bit of imagination, but we'll see how it all goes. This story begins and ends at the Sydney Ferry Terminal. We begin at New Year's Eve at 2:30 in the afternoon with a group of people trying to purchase ferry tickets, all rushing down to try and get onto the ferry with about 3 minutes to go, me included. So after a big race down towards a ticket machine, finding that my ticket nearly got stuck trying to get it through the gate, I myself with a whole bunch of people raced down with a bag in my hand to ferry gate 5. While trying to board, there's a woman screaming trying to get on the gangplank. She's got 3 kids that she can't find, and we already find they're already on board the ferry. So while she's screaming, she's blocking everybody else up, ferry people included, trying to get everybody at the last minute so the ferry can leave the dock. So after rushing out to the front, I'm looking around, of course, like a stuffed plover, looking for a place to actually park myself, and I find myself a little bit of an area at the front of the ferry where another girl, like myself, is rushing around looking for the same place. We decide after bumping into each other, we'll both sit on the same seat. So we sit there and we're on this ferry and we go through the whole afternoon, you know, trying to get to know each other like 2 people lost in the middle of a big city. Anyway, unbeknown to us, there is another person sitting on the seat on the other side who I will now call her ex. So what happens is that we get down and we start making a small film, you know, getting to know each other, you know, a few beers, a few things to eat. And we notice that this stranger is getting closer and closer onto the ferry. So I sit around and I turn around and said, do you know this guy? She turns around and said, oh God, she said, I thought I lost him at the railway station. So it turns out it was one of her ex-boyfriends that she'd been trying to dump for 12 months apparently, who must have somehow followed her into Sydney. Both finding that we're both from Melbourne and also have a past from Perth, I decided that I'll use my James Bond ingenuity and we'll find some ways that we can get rid of this rascal and find a bit of a spot for ourselves. So what I do is I get some nice little girl and I give her $5 to go up and talk to the guy for 5 minutes so we can go and dive down to the other end of the ferry, grab ourselves an ice cream and disappear into the dark areas of the back of the ferry where no one can find us. We race down through the back, we head down towards the terminal as we notice we're coming into Manly. I grab hold of Mim, who I know by her name by now and where she came from because we had a bit of time to talk. I decided to say, well, if you want to get rid of this guy, then there's only one way we can do it. We'll have to go through the back ends of Manly, crawl down through the side and find a nice little quiet bar that he doesn't know and we do. So after that, we decided to go down. We found a bar, which, believe it or not, was almost on the side of the ferry terminal. Last time I saw was this guy wandering around with a whole bunch of foreign tourists trying to ask him where directions were, so we left him where he was. We actually sat down, toasted ourselves our new meeting at the ferry terminal bar, enjoyed ourselves, had a nice drink, and said goodbye to good riddance and hope we won't see this guy again for the rest of the afternoon.
Wunderbar!
Unbeknown to us, that didn't happen. Anyway, we decided, by that stage, because this new girl was actually new to me and I was new to her, we decided, well, since we're two people stuck in the middle of Manly together and it's New Year's Eve, what a better way to actually spend New Year's Eve. But of course, her ex-boyfriend had other ideas. So as we were sitting down having a drink, racing through the bar yelling at screenies, you bitch, you left me for this bloody idiot. Why did you leave me? Who am I? And I just looked at this guy and said, mate, I no wonder you bloody left this bloke, So anyway, we left him screaming and half a dozen people disappearing. I grabbed her by the arm, took her through a couple of bars and clubs, playing cat and the mouse until we finally got down to Manly Beach. Her boyfriend had no idea where we were by that stage because he didn't know who we were. Anyway, having carried on, having a great idea, I took her through some of the other side streets. And then all of a sudden, about halfway up the other end of the corner, we're sitting there having a coffee, and there's this guy screaming around, looking around, and another couple of people actually blocking his way, thank goodness to us. Anyway, we enjoyed the great part of the afternoon and went through to the early part of the evening and decided we'll go celebrate New Year's Eve. We're sitting in a bar, enjoying ourselves, and who unbeknown to us, this guy comes screaming down, half drunk, falls on top of the bloody road right in front of the bar, where he gets picked up by black and white for being drunk and disorderly, and we say, goodbye buddy, nice to see you. Anyway, we finally get rid of him. We thought we get back during the rest of the night, enjoy the whole night, have a few drinks and catch the last ferry back to Sydney. As we're about to catch the last ferry out of Sydney, it looks like this guy must have got bailed out because he's screaming up, runs up the end of the gangplank, falls splash into the water and misses the ferry as it starts to leave the terminal. We finally sit around and say, well, gee, we had a good night. Anyway, we enjoy each other's company, and as we're just heading into woods of Sydney, we cruise underneath the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I turn around and we give ourselves a nice little toast, sing Auld Lang Syne, and I give this new girl a little peck on the cheek. I turn around in the morning and I can't find her anymore, she's gone. As I turn around, I check my back pocket and there I find her name and an email address. So I always wonder whatever had happened to that lovely girl and wonder if that boyfriend ever found her again. This was penned by Ian Gwynn, and I hope nobody else ever has a night like this.